Thank you for joining me. I'm Alex, and I would like to talk to you about basically the stupidity of gap accounting on Virgin Galactic, because that's a company that is really interesting to me. Not sure how viable the whole business model is, but at this point, it seems like they could be the first, and definitely will be one of the first three that does space vacations. Now, Virgin Galactic kind of wants to do that for like maybe a couple days. So they want to shoot a rocket into orbit and have people be on the rocket and come back down, and basically that's the whole thing. Current price is $8.43, which gives them a market cap of almost $700 million. Dividend is 0 and is going to stay there. I don't expect them to ever pay out a dividend. I expect them to kind of always push the envelope, and for that I don't think they will ever pay a dividend because it's better invested elsewhere. Current revenue is 0, and yet the earnings are $11 million, which is just pure bliss for me, because that's the stupidity of gap accounting. But that gives them a PE of 70, which is slightly high for me. Total assets $700 million. Total liabilities $25 million. The total liabilities went down from 600 and something million. Total stockholders equity $680 million, which went up from $5 million. So that's quite the percentage there. And to sum that all up, a lot of people were complaining about how Tesla does the revenue, and how they have all this deferred revenue because Autopilot, the features were not available, and so they couldn't recognize the money that was spent on Autopilot as revenue. So here we have the same thing. Virgin Galactic is selling things that don't exist yet, and so they can't actually recognize the revenue that they get from that. So basically they have zero income, exactly zero, because the only thing they sell is something that doesn't exist yet. And so once that actually exists, they can consider the revenue from the past few years as, over time, as the revenue that they have, which is just weird to me. But to go into the risk factors, there is still a very good chance that this will never happen. And by very good, I mean definitely over 10%, maybe over 25%. And there's two other companies that are kind of sort of working on the same thing. One would be Blue Origin, that Jeff Bezos founded. They also want to do space tourism stuff. And the other would be SpaceX, but they don't really want to do space tourism stuff. They want to do other planets tourism, kind of. So if Blue Origin gets off the ground faster, they could be the first and kind of cut into Virgin Galactic's profit here. But I think that obviously the space is big enough, especially when the costs come down, for both of them to have a reasonable size of the market here. And the market, I think, is big enough to sustain two companies, maybe more. And I assume there will be more companies once people have a viable product here. That is still years out, though. So I don't expect either of these companies to have any space tourism next year. I think 2021 would probably be close, but if they're moving at a pace that SpaceX is, 2021, especially towards the end of it, sounds plausible. I think that the timeline at this point is more 2023-ish, maybe even further out. So I don't expect the revenue to rise above 0 in the next year, and so I don't know I don't know how viable the company is as a whole, because before they have any revenue that they can recognize, they probably need to produce a product and see what the margins actually are. Seeing how expensive it is, I think that there could be a margin there, but again, without actually having that product is really hard to tell. So I think that this company is really interesting. I think it has the potential to be a fairly big company, but I think that the risk factors are also extremely high. So for that, I think a PE ratio of 70 is way too high, especially for a company that is not going to pay a dividend at any point. And so, as a growth investor, I think it's interesting enough, especially at a price of $8, to open a very small position as a speculative stock. But I don't think that anyone at this point, at the very least, should open a big position in Virgin Galactic and in the hopes of having a product at some point that makes the money. So, as a speculative stock, I definitely wouldn't go over 5% of anyone's portfolio, and that is for a very, very risk-oriented growth investor. If you're risk averse, I think that this is definitely not the company for you. And it doesn't matter if you're a dividend investor, growth investor, or a value investor, because there's just too much risk involved. And definitely for a value investor, you should probably stay away from this. But it's very interesting. It's a business model that I definitely like. And I think that the costs can come down enough to where, like, a middle class person could eventually maybe afford a flight out into space. And so for that to happen in 10, 15, 20 years, this company would probably end up being very big. So if you want to open a tiny position as a speculative stock, go ahead. For anyone else, I think you should probably find something else to invest in, because this is just too risky, too far out for any profit, and no dividend, and no safety of principle. So, that's it for me for today. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe. I'm coming out with more videos every day before market open. I hope you have a successful day.